Good morning, everyone. It's the Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Friday, the 8th of August, and it's myself and Jonny McFarlane on to discuss all the latest Rangers news, build up to Rangers v Dundee, and probably argue about some philosophical football chat. Jonny, they don't normally let us on together these days, so it is nice to have you.
Perhaps there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Are you all right? You well?
I'm good, yeah. I'm looking forward to some chat and looking forward to spending some time with you, Josh. I don't get to spend enough time talking to you about football, arguing with you about football, having you tear your hair out at me tear my whatever's remaining of my hair out at you. So yeah, looking forward to a bit of banter.
Okay, well, let's get into it. It's the show is, of course, brought to you by Willows Fencing, the Glasgow fencing company you can trust. Over 20 years experience. If you're looking for some work done, there's a special Rangers Review code and everything to get some money off to. All the relevant links are in the description. Okay, then, Jonny, let's get into it. Rangers v Dundee tomorrow. We're going to chat a little bit about the transfer state of play that Chris and I updated yesterday. Maybe we can start with that. An article we had on the website last night that went into a little bit more detail about what we're hearing in regards to Rangers transfer business for the rest of the window. We do these semi-regularly. We did them a couple of months ago, predicting from what we knew that there would be, for example, more of a domestic focus this year. Within that article, we talk about interest in Noble Mendy. Now, as specified, and I think as specified in Chris's tweet and as specified in the piece too, that is just interest at this stage. As we understand it, there hasn't been a formal bid and there is interest from elsewhere. As ever with Rangers in this window, things could move quickly, but Mendy is believed to have interest from La Liga too, and Rangers are also considering a few alternatives at the back. So if we start with maybe that bit of detail, Jonny, that Rangers want to strengthen at centre-back and left-back, the games you've watched so far, do you think that's the obvious, as the squad stands at the moment, before we talk about the potential of Egeman leaving or Raskin leaving, is that the area where you think they should be prioritising quality and depth at the moment?
Yeah, I do. However, I still think Rangers, if they want to be a credible title-winning team, need a striker who is absolutely razor sharp. What Celtic have had with Kyogo, I think Rangers still need. Dessers will get you goals over a season. We've seen that over and over. But I think that nailed on number 9, that you know who's starting every week, that there's no conversation over, that you can rely on to hit the net when he gets one chance in a game against Celtic. That to me is going to be a huge differentiator if Rangers can get that. But listen, 3 strikers are there. So first things first, you also need a left back that can play this inverted role.
Yeah.
Yefty I thought was pretty good. I have to say it was a big improvement in the game against Pilsen. But I think we've seen already that Russell Martin maybe has his reservations, given the fact that he's been playing. Max Aaron's out there. So, yeah, a left back that can do that can step inside and give you that kind of oomph in midfield alongside Joe Rothwell. I think that's something that they're going to have to add to the mix. Perhaps they're waiting for the situation with Ridvan to clear up before they do that, as illustrated in the article that you're talking about. For me, Josh, I don't think they have enough at centre half. I'm buoyed by these Mendy links. I like the look of this guy. When PSV are looking at a player, can't get it done because of the situation politically in Holland with bringing in people from different climes. That to me is a big tick, because they have got a great track record. And if you can go and get this guy, I think you need a plethora of centre-halves at Rangers. I think the way Scottish football is, if you're playing at centre-back, there's going to be injuries. We know John Souttar has his injuries. I don't know about the players that have been brought in. If we're talking about Gigar Fernandez, I'm not sure about their injury backgrounds, Josh. I don't know how robust they are in terms of a 60-game season. But if you get beyond those 3, I'd be slightly concerned. Look, no one's a bigger fan of Dujon Sterling than me. I think he's terrific. He's terrific at centre-back. He's terrific at right-back. He's terrific in midfield. I think the guy's a great player. But we know what he's like. He plays 20 games a season. It's another problem. And James Tavernier, I really like James Tavernier at centre-back when it's in a 3. That to me works. I've been banging on about that for at least 4 years. But in a 4, James Tavernier, that's at a push. That's at a push for me. So I'm looking for 4 centre backs with Sterling complementing that, with Tavernier complementing that. Then you've got 6 guys that are capable of playing in there, and that's enough. But this is the final position you want to be caught short in Scottish football. It's the last one. You do not want to be in that situation where you have a couple of injuries and all of a sudden you're looking at James Tavernier at centre back in a back 4. No, not for me.
Yeah, no, it is short at the moment, and that's what I think we've said for a couple of months, that 3 centre backs, much like 3 wingers, has been the priority, the focus. Comment here from Bluebells or Blue saying Rangers short at centre half. If you consider Nsiala has been told to go, Suter, Nasser Giga, Fernandez, then Leon King. You also have Ben Davies there, but King, Davies, and Nsiala alongside Ridvan and Matondo and others need to move on. And that's, Rangers have this benefit of, like, they can buy before selling, which allows them to be aggressive, which allows the squad to, I think it's 9 new arrivals if you include Lyle Cameron, 10 if you include Oscar Cortez. But it's a big wage bill building up here that they need to offset somehow. So yeah, I guess to sum that up, no Bill Mendy, there's interest there, but nothing finalised by any means, is our understanding at this stage. And there is a concrete interest from La Liga that might be hard for Rangers to compete with and overcome, should that decision be made quickly, which we anticipate it will be. So you're looking at a centre back and left back as I think the 2 priorities, Jonny. I wonder what you think about Max Aarons, because he's kind of had mixed reviews so far. Comment here, if I can find it, from Craig, saying Aarons doesn't seem any better than Tav. I mean, he's obviously played sort of out of position for a few weeks, but also I thought he was. You look at the it wasn't the assist, but the pass he played for, who was it? Oliver Antman. A lot of new names to learn in this starting 11. He played that similar one in the first half.
I was outstanding that pass.
Yeah,
absolutely outstanding. It was Scott Allen level, that pass.
No, don't start me. What have you made of him? Would you start him tomorrow? Because presuming he's not got that knock, I'd be starting him in the biggest game at the moment, and I would rotate Tavernier in for the away game in Czech Republic next week.
I've learned through bitter experience on this show and going back further than this show that you never jump into conclusions with new signings. I've seen guys come in and do amazingly well for a month and you think, wow, and then they fall away. I've seen guys have a brilliant first game or brilliant couple of games and then fall away. So I think it's far too early to be judging the signings. Based on what I've seen so far with Aarons, I would say it's been kind of mixed. He's been up and down. There's been great moments in the games. We talk about that pass. That was a really, really terrific moment of just quality in that area, coming inside and finding that ball. But at the same time, I've seen him give away sloppy passes quite a few times. I've seen him look very, very uncomfortable at left back when people were talking about him having played there many times, and I'm being kind of almost a guy who can play on either side. I don't think that's the case, certainly not at the level Rangers are at. But you know what? I think he looks like he can play football. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. I just would say that you need to give him a bit of time to get used to what is a very, very different style of play.
Yeah.
That cannot be understated. Russell Martin is looking for something a little bit different, and he's packing a lot of information into his brain, and he's asking him to really, really think about every movement he makes, because every movement matters. And until that becomes second nature, I think you're going to see, especially in these full-back areas, a little bit of slight confusion. People say I always go on about Ange Postecoglou on this pod, but we saw this under Ange Postecoglou when he brought in these inverted full-back roles at Celtic. And at first, the left back and right back for Celtic didn't really know what they were doing. But eventually, Greg Taylor got the hang of it at left back, and at right back, it was the Croatian guy whose name escapes me now, Juranovic. And they suddenly, it clicked after 4 or 5 or 6 games. And I think you need to give them time to get on top of that, because it's not easy and it's different to what they've done before.
Yeah, it is. I agree with that. Moving on slightly then, because we'll get through all these kind of transfer talking points and then maybe move on to Dundee. The number 9 position, you've said there, Rangers need a razor sharp, not just a number 9, but a razor sharp number 9. Mac, a good friend of the show, Turgeman's being linked with the MLS. Should we be moving for him ASAP? The issue Rangers have is that they can't. There's an element of stockpiling that they've obviously, and I think there's an acknowledgement it's been a risk. So, for example, the fact that they've really beefed up their midfield and brought in these number of wingers when they've still got Matondo in the books. Now, Matondo isn't playing at the moment, but he's still picking up serious wages. The fact that they're still looking at the centre back and left back position while we've got Ridvan there, and again, as we reported yesterday, still a gap in valuation between what Besiktas are willing to pay at the moment and what Rangers want. That's one that could drag out a little bit. But we've seen the squad start to stockpile a little bit in a way that you couldn't last season because you needed the finances to go and buy. Rangers haven't been in this position for a while. And I do think that's something that we should give attention to, because it's very easy and probable that a number of these players stay and then really push up that wage bill and put pressure on it. Yeah. But the number 9 position, Jonny, I don't think that is somewhere you can necessarily stockpile, because you've got 3 players on decent enough wages. You've got Cyril Dessers and Danilo, who have come in as first-team players. You've got Hamza Egeman, who's had this ongoing saga of his future this summer. It's possible that is your trio heading into next season once the window closes. My take is that if they're all fit, if they're locked in and Egeman isn't frustrated about not getting his move, I think that 3 is enough, because Dessers then isn't your first choice. He can come in at different points. Danilo, I still think we're to see the best of. It's also the first time he's played a number of games in about a year. Do you still think that either Rangers would need one more on top of that, or would you still like to see them try and bring in someone of a higher quality of any of those 3 forwards?
So I'm a big fan of Egeman.
Yeah.
I think you've got a rare player there who has the ability to pull something off the cuff. Don't think you see many of those guys in Scottish football, and that's why there's so much interest in him, or there has been. So many clubs are monitoring him. But I'm not convinced that he's a good fit for this Russell Martin team. I'm not convinced that the manager would look at Egeman and see a player that fits his mould. I think he's looking for someone that is more of a grafter, is less of an individualist, is someone who's doing different things than what Egeman brings. And I worry about Egeman as the Rangers number 9, because having listened to Barrie Ferguson and Billy Dodds talk about Egeman and what he's like in training and what he brings to the team, I think it was fairly clear they weren't convinced about his work rate, and they weren't convinced about his team play. And in this system, which I think is very much about the cohesive whole rather than the individual, I just wonder about that, Josh. I wonder about the fit. I think if Egeman was to go to Lille or anyone else, maybe it's a blessing in disguise for all concerned. Cyril Dessers, I am now just accepting that he's going to be a solid number 2 striker for Rangers.
Yeah.
But I still think they need a number 1. You notice I'm just ignoring Danilo, because I just don't see that happening based on what I've seen. And that might be a bit unfair, because the entire time he's been here, he's been blighted by injury. Seems like a lovely guy. I know he does a lot behind the scenes. But just in terms of what I've seen, the evidence I've seen, it's a no for me. And I think that's one that you need to try and get him out on loan, because he's got a 5-year contract. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. So you've got another 3 years of Danilo. So I think you need to get him out, performing well, maybe in the Dutch league this season or wherever, and hope to try and recoup some of that 4 to 6 million, depending on who you believe that Rangers actually spent on this guy, because it is a lot of money. But I've always worried about Danilo, Josh. Just he's a slight guy. I can see what Michael Beale saw in him, because I think his link-up play is good. His movement is good. He's intelligent. He's good in the air for his size, really good in the air. But I just don't think he's really suited to the kind of rigors that we have in this game. You talk about the weather and the physicality. I just don't think he's going to be able to stand up to it. Just in a similar way I feel about Ridvan. I'm not convinced about that aspect. So for me, I think if you can start to facilitate some sort of plan towards a move next season, because I don't think realistically any club is going to come in and even offer £2.5 million for Danilo. Do you? I mean, just based on his injury track record in the last 2 years.
Yeah, obviously had that kind of good pre-season. A lot of it was behind closed doors, so it's hard to accurately judge that. And I think he's actually a player who he's better when he's playing close to others. And I think this system actually isolates him quite a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas Dessers, for his faults, and I actually thought Dessers link. It was interesting to see Dessers with similarly to Jack Butland. You think of Dessers as he isn't very good at hold-up play unless there's like a defender right at his back and there's space to play into but when he's having to force the issue or play the creative pass, I don't think that's his strength. Although early in his Rangers career, he did have those assists against PSV. And
I always remember that pass.
Celtic. But I think similarly to Jack Butland, the interesting thing you've heard Russell Martin say throughout pre-season is when he's effectively been asked, look, can Butland play this? Can he pass? Can he take these risks? The response has been, and I'm paraphrasing, he's not taking risks for the sake of it, and he will have options. He'll have options. And you see that a lot with the way that Giga inverts at points and plays with his back to the opposition, and it looks a bit strange, but I think it can be effective because it's all about these mini games of how can you find the free man, how can you create a 2v1 to then progress up the pitch with control, which is what you saw for the third goal. And similarly, roundabout point, Dessers I thought looked a bit better with a few hold-up options near him. Not quite, I think Danilo drops a little bit more effectively, but I just wonder if he's a player who can occupy a defence in the same way that Dessers can. What I would say in response to that is if you put Danilo into a team maybe where he's got Antman providing a few opportunities, does he get closer to goal? Does he have to do a little bit less of the linking up? Because he was playing in a team that had a lot of square pegs and round holes and therefore maybe relied on playing that ball into him a little bit too frequently. And my slight pushback on Egaman would be, from last season, I don't think he's had excellent coaching and a really good system. Rangers were a really bad football team last year domestically. Worst points total since 2017. He also only had a run of 2 months where he played in his favoured number 9 position. That aside, he was kind of shunted out to the left wing, or he had to play this number 10 role. And if you look at his career, can you say that he's worked with a top coach like a Russell Martin to really improve his game and get the best out of him? So I accept what you're saying, that when
I think it'd be slightly unfair on Philippe Clement, who did win 3 titles in Belgium, but
but you watched the.
I know, based on what we saw at Rangers.
Based on what we saw, I don't think how many players improved individually. Did Egaman was again, he was sacrificed for Dessers to play that number 9 role, and then had to. So I think that's the pushback, is that he has this fantastic run over Christmas where he scores like 12, 13, 14 goals in as many games.
Yeah.
But then he kind of gets shunted to the bench or out wider in the number 10 position. So as much as you could criticise certain elements of his game, perhaps, I also think, have you put him in the best environment last season to excel his talent? And I would say no.
Listen, I agree with that, but I would actually lay that more at the door of Barry Ferguson's tenure, because I did think there was obviously a period when he first came in when he was injured, and then I think an acclimatisation period to both the standards and the quality of Rangers training and what was expected of him tactically and technically. He was given a few substitute appearances. He was brought in slowly, and I think that worked well. You can't argue with that, because when he really came in, he made a massive impact, didn't he? And then he went on a run. So you could say, well, he should have been put in earlier, but I actually think partially the reason he performed was because he was carefully managed into the team. But then I think when Barrie came in, Barrie was all about winning because he wanted the job, which should have never been what it was about. And what I counselled on this pod, I think you mentioned it as well, the worst thing that could happen is someone who comes in here who's trying to win every game in terms of just results and not looking at the process, because you've got so many young players here who have potential. If they're nurtured and they play a lot of minutes and they're given the time and space, this season is over. Nothing is left, with the exception of the European games, which are different, and you can understand that. But fundamentally, I think there there was a number of factors that were going on, weren't there, that led Barrie to kind of believe that there was an opportunity to get the job there. And I think realistically, the only way he could have done that would have been if he had gone and lifted a European trophy and got to the final.
Yeah, but you can understand that you see this with Dessers, that managers fundamentally want players they can trust. You see it with Russell Martin so far, why he's been so active in the transfer window, and Rangers have been caught in all these cycles of short term and long term and reset and rebuild. This is a third summer in a row where they've signed 9 players or more. That's just so unsustainable. The two positions we're talking about them looking at today, trying to add at centre back and left back, potentially one to cover 2, but in an ideal world, to get 2 players there. It was only 3 summers ago they spent big money to bring Ben Davies and Rid van Yilmaz in, and now they're trying to push them out the door. Regardless of where Rangers are in the food chain and who their ownership is, that is an unsustainable pattern, and it's why it's going to be difficult to move players out the door between now and the end of the window.
I was actually going to say this earlier, Josh. One of the things about this whole stockpiling thing and why it's been a real testament to the new ownership that they have just been prepared to press the button on so many of these signings and kind of really give Russell Martin some tools to work with. I don't think anyone can say that they haven't backed him so far, and we know more will come. But Ben Davies and Matondo alone, comfortably £55,000 a week they are taking, and more, but over 55,000 from the two of them. So when you're talking about that kind of level of wages, you have to be careful, because there are parameters, and Rangers don't want to be getting caught into a situation where you get to the end of the window and you haven't been able to move that kind of guy out. I actually don't think they're going to have a problem with Ben Davies, because he was successful last season in England. He's got a really good track record in the Championship. You know, I always remember when Liverpool were talking about why they signed Ben Davies. I think one of their one of the guys underneath the sporting director was talking about like looking at the data for the best defender in the Championship, because they needed someone in who could, I think, come in as 5th choice centre back just to give them cover. And Ben Davies was the best defender in the Championship based on Liverpool's data. And we know Liverpool had a real advantage in their data at that time. If you read the book How to Win the Premier League, that kind of fully explains what they were doing. So he has a track record in the Championship. He has a track record in League One from last season at a top performing side in Birmingham. And I think even though he's on high wages, not far under 30 grand a week, I think there will be Championship takers for him come the end of the window, because of that track record. Now, maybe Rangers have to take a hit slightly on a percentage, but I think he'll go. I don't think he'll be stuck in Rangers reserves for the next year. Matondo, I'd be more concerned about, given the paucity of performance in his loan last season, and you combine that with his injuries. It's difficult. I think one thing for sure, Ross Wilson's had a really, really good career since he left Rangers, but one of the things maybe he'll look back on and think about in terms of his signings are, I think there was an attempt by Rangers almost to think that we'll give players a fantastic care here at the Rangers training centre. We'll look after them. We've got a good medical setup, and we'll almost put aside some of their injuries. There was quite a lot of gambles, I think, in terms of the kind of guys that maybe had an injury history, but we'll look after them. I'm thinking, obviously, Aaron Ramsey, Kemar Roof, and then you've got players like Tom Lawrence, Rid van Yilmaz, Matondo, who have just been consistently injured the whole time since they've arrived. And I think that's been a situation that has kind of probably marred the last year or so of Wilson's tenure at Rangers, because quite a few of these guys came in and there's this consistent thread of injury problems. We know Scottish football's physical, and it does tend to exacerbate that, but it's been ridiculous, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, let's get to some comments. Billy says Danilo seems to be lacking in the system, but Curry says Danilo does a pile of running with little or no impact in the game so far this season.
Josh, he has worked his backside off.
Yeah, he has ran, that's sure. Joshua, Jonny, any update on Asgard and Sterling? Radio silence in both. It's included in the piece we published yesterday, but we believe the hope with Dujon Sterling is that he could be back in October. Asgard seek another update at the press conference today, because that is one that has dragged on, and we've spoken about it a couple of times this week. But yeah, definitely longer than the initial diagnosis that Russell Martin spoke about. Josh asking, is Mikey Moore available for the weekend? Again, expecting Russell Martin to update on that today. Another detail that's included in the piece, Jonny, which we won't go into a ton at the moment because we'll move on quickly to Dundee game on Saturday tomorrow. But Rangers, still the expectation is they will have this loan cooperation agreement with Wraith Rovers. We're led to believe they've also held talks about the possibility of that with Alloa. The rule, if you don't know what this is that in line with the under-18s league going to an under-19s league, clubs will now be able to send up to 5 players on loan, I believe, to a team in each division, which enables them to, basically it's easier for them to get back and train together, to maybe all go to a club where the style of play suits them a little bit more. There is interest in Finlay Curtis. That would perhaps more likely be in the Premier League than the Championship. Josh Gentles, you could perhaps see him go out on loan. I think that's very likely, as he did last season. We'll have loads of youth coverage for you throughout the campaign, but a little bit of background on that too. I want to move on to Dundee, but Null FC making this point. I worry we have backed Russell Martin too strongly. I bought into Josh's chat about club DNA, and now he stood me up. Is there a risk that Rangers are being too manager heavy on the recruitment front, Jonny? Because this is always the balance, isn't it? Of you need to back the man to a degree. I think sometimes it can be a bit of a, I don't quite know what the phrase is, but I think most clubs are quite similar, and it's not just one person making the decision. Maybe in certain dynamics, a certain voice will have more of a say. I think you can see from even Martin's comments post Motherwell, he is being backed, and this is, and I don't think there will be an adherence to the noise and the pressure like there has been in the past.
Yeah.
The club DNA point, I think there is more of a lot of these things are actions speak louder than words, right?
Well,
so, for example, if Rangers were to go to the next manager and change their go and appoint a manager with a completely different style of play, then I think that renders that insignificant. I think you will see them try to avoid that from now on.
I've got a question for you, and I suppose this is an important question, because my belief would be that this style that they're implementing with Russell Martin is not just Russell Martin's style; it's essentially a club style.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kevin Thelwell, if Russell Martin is not successful, is not going to pivot to, let's just say, pull a name out of the hat, Sean Dyche. I don't think he's going to pivot from Russell Martin to Sean Dyche, although he may. I don't think so, though.
Speak that into existence.
I think what Rangers are going to do now is stick to a very similar style of head coach for the next 3 or 4 appointments. If they don't do that, I'll be here asking major questions. That's how stable modern clubs work. And while I've had some issues around some of the recruitment, I've had some questions around the style of play, I do think that Rangers need a dominant domestic style of play that focuses on attacking, aggressive, final front foot football. That is what Russell Martin is supposed to do. That's what it looks like at his best. That's what we saw in the game against Pilsen. If he can apply that to the Scottish domestic game, Russell Martin's going to have a very good season, I'd say. Yeah. So, for me, that's where Rangers need to focus on going, not this kind of schizophrenic, that hasn't worked, let's move to something completely opposite, and then back, and then forth, and then you have this mad hodgepodge squad, which is what Russell Martin's inherited. It needs to be much more of a steady Eddie, through-line philosophy. Holistic is the word that I'm looking for, Josh, to use the football kind of cliche, modern football cliche. But that, to me, is what's happening. So I don't see it as a Russell Martin, as a too Russell Martin-orientated strategy. I don't. I think Gassama and Ant-Man are going to be good players under any manager.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Rothwell is a player that can perform in the Scottish Premiership under any manager. I would posit. So I don't see anyone that you would go, well, what's this what would the next manager do with that guy? But listen, it's early days, and all these assessments are being made with incomplete information. I'm open for Russell Martin to be a success or a failure at this point, because I just haven't seen enough to make a final judgment. Everyone who'll be watching this show will be wanting Russell Martin to be a huge success, because if he's a huge success, it'll mean fantastic football, and finally Rangers will be getting title number 56. So that's a given. But you're better placed to talk about this than me, because you're in with the bricks. You're talking to the people at Rangers, so you tell me what you think on that.
Yeah, I think the example I used in a piece that a few months ago was the best run club probably in Europe or Liverpool. If you look at the money they've put in compared to where they are now, the money they can now spend. And when Liverpool lost Klopp, they didn't ask his assistants to take the job or ask Klopp for his recommendation, a la Sir Alex Ferguson and David Moyes in 2013. The first thing they did was they went and recalibrated all their backroom staff, their sporting director, the head of FSG, got all the boring things in place, because the most important thing is structure. And what you've seen with Rangers in the past 5 years is they've been the complete opposite of that, so that they've just been kind of grasping around in the dark, so much so that last season was the nadir in that you didn't even have the logistical. This is where the sympathy for Clement is right. You didn't have the logistical situation to sack him, but also he was a manager who was fulfilling so many more roles than a manager should. So of course that's going to impact his job and his preparation. In the same way, you could argue that although Michael Beale, I think it suited him to be so hands-on with recruitment, I don't think it's a coincidence that when he first came back to the club, the football was better and the results were better. And as soon as positions around him started to open up too and he had to do more, I think what you saw on the pitch decreased in quality. It remains to be seen, and it takes time and more conversations to ascertain what are the dominant voices in recruitment, who's behind this one, who's behind that one, and how will the season go. But I think overall, the positive thing for Rangers is that they seem to have a bit of as you say, commitment to a style of play that works around the world. What was the last dominant league that was won by a team who didn't dominate the ball? I can't think of one off the top of my head. This is, whether you like it or not, this is roughly the way in which football is going. So you've got to go after it. The difficulty is, I don't think you can just copy, like, for example, what Celtic have done in their style. You've got to innovate in some way and to catch up and overtake them and go ahead. So yeah, I don't know. The proof's going to be in this season, but certainly the club DNA chat surfaces more specifically, I think, around when the manager is to go, because he will in some capacity, whether it's for success or for failure. Is this squad set up for the next man, or is it completely niche? So when you go from Gerrard to Gio plays with wingers, Gerrard doesn't, and then you spend you've got to do the whole squad cycle to get ready for the next man, and then when the next man comes in, it's different again. And Rangers did that 4 times when they went to Gio, to Beale, when they went to Clement. That was your issue.
Yeah, I'm not. Sounds like I'm nitpicking with you here, but I don't actually think Gio and Gerrard were actually that different beyond the wingers. I think you buy in a couple of wingers, it's not a big deal. I think the bigger issue was going from Beale to Clement, and Clement's football being very different, I thought, to what Rangers were trying to do before that. I think with Beale and Gio and Gerrard, there was kind of a sort of through line, roughly, in what they were doing. That's why I think Gio was able to take over that team and elevate it with what he brought to the table, especially in Europe, obviously. But I think Clement was needing something completely different, and now you're going to Russell Martin, who's completely different again, and therefore you need this financial injection that's been coming from the Americans, because without it, this just wouldn't work at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few more comments before we close up. What time is the presser today? I think it's about 1:30 is
It's
the
normally
time I have
1:30.
yeah. So we will bring you full coverage from that, of course. Alan saying, what do we do differently tomorrow if Dundee are camped on the edge of the box, knocking it about the back, won't draw some teams out at Ibrox? My hot take on that is that I think Russell Morton probably rather face low blocks or wouldn't be that fussed, but he'd back his coaching, I think, to work that out. So we'll see, but it's the first time we've really seen that, and it is a different challenge, and maybe relies on an early goal, set piece goal. So we will see tomorrow. What changes would you make, Jonny, from the team? I wouldn't. I don't think I'd make a single change. Probably, maybe bring in Raskin for Rothwell because I think Rothwell looks a bit tired.
Yeah.
You'd maybe like to see Emmanuel Fernandez at one point in that left centre back slot. I think he needs to play one of these 2 games coming up. You know, he's 23. Rangers have spent good money on him. What changes would you make?
It's an interesting one. It's a really, really kind of good thinker because from a managerial point of view, do you do what you suggested, and just play the best team that you can possibly play and take Dundee really seriously, and then maybe integrate a Fernandez or a Raskin in the anchor position, or some other changes for the Pilsen game because you're so far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, I'd almost be kind of tempted to go the other way because Dundee are rank rotten. Sorry to Stephen Presley, but they are, based on what we've seen. It's at Ibrox. They are going to sit in a low block. I think Rangers can afford to make a few changes in that one. Personally, I just think you need experience for that game against Pilsen. Yes, you're 3-0 up.
Yeah.
But if they get an early goal, suddenly it becomes a little bit testy, a little bit strained. And listen, brass tacks, Josh, £5 million rests on this Pilsen game. If you qualify for the playoff, you're guaranteed $5 million regardless. It's a lot of money. And I think that, for me, would probably edge it because I genuinely don't see Dundee as a threat. I think Dundee are going to go down this year. I think they're going to be the worst team in the division. It's a shame because I quite like Dundee as a club. I think I think what they're trying to do with Stephen Presley is to give the club more of an identity, play a different style of football, be a bit more modern. But I just don't think it's going to work. And Presley, I think so far the results, I think defeats to Alloa. Can't remember the other team but I think there was a team that was even further down the pecking order that beat them as well. So I think that's a game at Ibrox. The fans are up after the win, after the great performance against Pilsen. Just go after them, blood and thunder. But maybe put in 2 or 3 players that you can change in and see what they're capable of.
Yeah, comment here, multiple man. They have Alloa the following weekend, make changes then, which is an important to remember too. And Tom says, anyone heading out to the Czech Republic, we will be out there, Tom, of course, bringing you all the press conference coverage and hopefully giving you a feel from the match, which is it's a big one, Jonny, because they're 3-0 up, but as you say, that there's so much on the line to get into this Champions League playoff, and Rangers have a fighter's chance of making it if they get through this tie, which they should. And it is against Club Bruges. Bruges is difficult, but it's not the most difficult playoff round you could get. It's going to be interesting to see. Do Rangers even want to get into the Champions League from a performance point of view? I think they need to strengthen their squad. Again, of course, they, in an ideal world, would like to get there, but I think Russell Martin would understandably be asking for a little bit more if they could. Long way to go until then. We'll leave it there. We will.
Well, let me just clarify something. I said 5 million. It's 4 million. So sorry about that. It was 5 million. I've been called a misinformed, lazy, specky gimp by a guy who's just been blocked.
Wow, that's harsh. That's early as well to be early to be. Guy needs to relax. Right, we'll leave it there. Yeah, we'll leave it there. We will be back tomorrow before and after the game, as ever, bringing you your live on the whistle reaction. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't; it's free. And a load of people watching Jonny aren't subscribed, so please do click that button. Really helps us to improve our coverage, as we are already trying to do in this new season. We'll bring you your press conference coverage later too. Stick with us then, and we will speak to you live tomorrow. Bye for now.